The following program contains content that may not be suitable for children. Parental discretion is advised.
Help women save lives and peacefully end abortion where you live.
I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired.
You were serious about that?
Be inspired to change hearts and minds by joining over 1 million volunteers taking part in the global movement happening in your neighborhood.
She says, pray that I can get through this abortion. And I said, oh, no. So she went ahead and went into the abortion clinic. And she just came out. She told us, I'm not going to get the abortion. We just had a baby saved. So we had a baby saved in Memphis today. Praise the Lord.
This is the 40 Days for Life podcast with your host, Sean Carney.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the 40 Days for Life podcast. I'm Sean Carney, the president of 40 Days for Life, and your host for this podcast, which is dedicated to helping you end abortion where you live. And, of course, you're all wondering where I got this amazing 40 Days for Life fleece, and the answer is free, 40daysforlifegear.com. We got a lot of new products as we get into winter. Many of you, hopefully, are getting ready to go March for Life at your local marches or the March for Life in D.C. or the West Coast Walk for Life, but definitely be marching for life, and you can do so in great winter 40 Days for Life gear. So be sure to go to 40daysforlifegear.com and get your winter gear. Also, since we're plugging ourselves and it's a new year and we, maybe need a little pro-life resolutions, tack it on to the many other things, whether it's losing weight or spending more time in prayer or whatever you're doing with your New Year's resolutions, don't forget the unborn and be equipped to defend the unborn with What to Say When To as we enter our full year. That book has been great. Thank you for all the support. We released it back in September. It was like a long time ago, and it's only been out 4 or 5 months. And so be sure to get your copy as 2025 is lining up to be yet another year where those who are opposed to our position on abortion get crazier, and we've already seen a little of that happen. Finally, on the housekeeping items, join us for really something we're focusing on. We've been working on this behind the scenes a lot, and that is defunding Planned Parenthood. We are going to give you the top 5 things you can do in the first 100 days of 2025 to defund Planned Parenthood. We will be having a Defund Planned Parenthood webcast, and to sign up for that, you see the link, please do. It's filling up quickly. Go to defundplannedparenthood.com, defundplannedparenthood.com, and you can register to be part of the Defund Planned Parenthood webcast, and it's going to be really, really exciting as we highlight the 5 things you can do to help defund Planned Parenthood in the first 100 days, and 2 of them you can do right after the webcast. So we will let you know about that. We're also not asking for money on that webcast, just a note. So one of them is not give us money, we promise you. So joining me on this important podcast is somebody who's always giving away money to everybody he meets, and that is Mr. Steve Carlin, who joins us from Madison, Wisconsin.
Look, I told you I'd pay you back next week.
Do you know Steve Carlin? Know him. He owes me $10. And Heather Gardner's here. You don't know anybody, anything.
No, not at all.
We were laughing earlier when we were starting to record because Heather brought up Christmas, and I said, be quiet, Christmas is over.
And how dare you? We are still in the Christmas season.
We are still in the Christmas season.
Right, Steve?
Well, yesterday was Epiphany and the anniversary of the insurrection.
Oh, no. Come on.
And we would like to take this moment to reveal that Steve Carlin was, in fact, there on January 6th climbing. You were the guy with the horns.
Oh, no.
Usually I don't wear them out. They're personal use only.
I do have family that was there on J6, by the way.
I guess it's safe to say that on the podcast now.
I don't know. Maybe.
Maybe wait 2 weeks on that one.
Was it an uncle? Was it an aunt? Was it a row? I won't name who they were. But
wow.
I've got something to share.
What?
I think you're going to be happy with me. I think you'll be proud of me.
You get married?
Finally, at long last, watched Braveheart.
Oh, very good. good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Horns and
Yeah, speaking of cutting people's
Paint.
heads off and insurrection, lie to me unless it's positive. Did you like it?
It was awesome.
It's awesome. Braveheart is the greatest movie of all time.
You know all the different movies that I haven't seen, the many and sundry and various movies I haven't seen. If more movies were like Braveheart, I would watch more movies.
You need to watch The Patriot.
Okay.
That's basically American version of Braveheart. One of these days, the Brits will quit screwing around with Mel Gibson and realize he's not to be messed with. But The Patriot's very good, very good.
I don't even get 10 seconds to dwell on finally watching Braveheart. Now it's you got to watch this.
Yeah.
You got to watch it's on to next year.
never enough.
But Braveheart is awesome. The music is great. The scenery is great. They filmed it on the west coast of Ireland. No, I absolutely love Braveheart. It's my favorite movie of all time.
I was excited about it and wouldn't stop talking to my wife about it.
So, not to dwell on this, but watching it again is even better after the first time because you just notice so much stuff that's awesome. It's also kind of crazy that he directed it and starred in it. Like, that's hard. It's got to be really hard. And it won every Academy Award you could think of.
It deserved it. I read that it was the second most historically inaccurate movie ever made, but I don't care. It was great. It was awesome.
Yeah, Longshanks was a nice guy. He didn't want anybody dead. Actually, yeah, there's a lot of there are historical inaccuracies. Obviously, he didn't sleep with the Queen. That was absurd. That's definitely Hollywood. But
that I thought was the only black eye on that movie. I thought that was unfortunate. He's like this man of virtue. He's praying the whole time, and then he goes and sleeps with a married queen. I was disappointed.
The Queen is beautiful, but still, that was inappropriate.
Okay.
Mel had an agenda.
Let's give him some credit.
He has a
That's what I'm
thing.
hearing.
He has a. You see how I even defend the sins of the movie. He has a thing where Mel Gibson, he'll just kind of insert himself as like the desired male, especially during that time. What Women Want. Did you ever see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's a
gosh.
lot of those movies where he just makes himself like.
He is it.
Yeah, and he couldn't resist with like he's now sleeping with the Queen of England. That's not appropriate. One of the things that is inaccurate, it's like when the sign came down here, you know, and they said an unplanned, they pulled it down with a bulldozer, and you're like, that's totally inaccurate. But the real story is better. The Braveheart story. This isn't better. I'm not saying that, but so the son who was Longshanks's kid, okay, the son who was a little flaky.
Mm-hmm.
Longshanks didn't kill him.
Okay.
He exiled him to Ireland where the Irish castrated him. That was so that's how that worked out. But other than that, the battles are actually accurate. All the battles happened and William Wallace really did, you know, so...
We should have discussed this a couple weeks ago before Christmas because you make fun of me for waiting too long to celebrate Christmas. And I'm like, when they have got their long spears, they're like, wait.
Hold. It's not wait, it's hold. Hold. I do that when we're pulling up and the kids are trying to get out of the van.
Okay.
Like it's like an ongoing. And of course, the younger ones have no idea what it's from. But when I showed the teenagers Braveheart, they're like, that's where that's from. We just thought you like to say it because you're stupid, you know. Like, oh.
So back in like early high school, I was not around to see this, but Laura had like some kind of class project where they had to come in and deliver a speech as a historical character. And like all of the girls were taking like these sort of demure, very feminine characters like Katharine Hepburn and I don't know who else. And Laura went in and painted her face blue and gave a speech as William Wilberforce.
William Wallace.
Yeah, William
That's
Wallace.
awesome.
Yeah.
Your wife did that.
Yes.
She did the speech on the horse. Today's all the days, from this day to that, to come back for just one chance.
Do you have video of this?
I don't. I wish it would have been
Be
an
awesome.
era of video, but it would be pretty good, and she could hit the accent. And she's also, for those who don't know her personally, 4'11", so it adds a little extra comedy.
Oh, she's absolutely tiny. That's what's so cool too. All the like side characters. The king is actually great. Like not as a person, but the actor. He's a famous actor. I forget his name, but he's fantastic. And Seamus, his buddy, who's the big guy. He's a great actor. The Irish guy is hysterical.
And he was named Steven, wasn't he?
Uh-huh.
That guy was awesome.
He must have been awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, named Steven.
Just saying.
Oh, his name is Seamus in the movie.
Oh, why did I think it was Steven? I don't know. I can't understand it.
He's Seamus. Yeah. No, he's Seamus.
You know I don't speak
You gotta look at the
Spanish.
credits. No, it was very, very, very well done. And boy, did you see the horse coming? Then we'll get off this, but I'm interested. When he comes in, so she's dead, and he's kind of gonna now let this scrapper come to me, and so he's gonna come in and turn himself in, but then he pulls the chain out.
No, that was awesome. I was.
You didn't
caught
see
by
it coming.
surprise. No,
Oh, me neither.
no.
So I saw Braveheart. See, you really like it, and you're what, 40,
41.
41? So I was 13 when I saw Braveheart. It's the greatest thing ever.
This is a film that I think really emphasizes a point that you've made, which is a good point, which is that the Marvel movies are terrible.
They're awful.
You don't want the CGI. Like, there was good plot. The violence scenes were excellent. There was purpose behind everything, and it wasn't computer generated.
Yep. Outfits, music. The cinematography and the music in
remember
Braveheart.
The music being good. So I don't remember watching Braveheart the entire way through. I remember I was young enough that I was like, oh, it's graphic and freaky. So I saw parts of it, but I do remember the music being awesome.
Braveheart 2 paved the way for Saving Private Ryan. Because you watch Saving Private Ryan, Braveheart looks like Barney.
Oof.
I mean, it's rough. And then they got, I didn't see any of these movies, but they get into the sadistic, like the Saw movies. And now it's just like violent and all that. But the violence, as you get with the CGI, it's just different. Because in Braveheart, there's a few scenes where you're like, okay, that kind of looked fake. But there's some that they really, when he cuts the guy's head off, and he totally deserved it, by the way. But you're like, how did they do that? Because the camera cuts and his head pops up, and you're always interested in how that works. But no, it's very, very impressive. And the 90s, once again, come through.
There was just so much virtue behind it. He, like, when you see the way they are, like, treating the women, and they treat his wife and they kill his wife, you're like, yeah, he was doggone right to go after him.
Absolutely. Totally. That is, in all seriousness, that's what's so stupid about the Queen stuff. Because it just takes away, and it would be more powerful. And this is like Hollywood can't help themselves. They're like, hey, these people should have sex. Why? I don't know. And but she's helping them, and that's kind of powerful. Like, which I doubt that happened. But the whole thing with it's just unnecessary and not needed.
Yeah, it took away.
But
let's just forget about that. It was an awesome film, and I will watch more movies as a result of how much I like that. It was the exact inverse and opposite experience of when you told me to watch Terminator, and I was like, forget this whole list.
But that's a buildup. That's a buildup.
Okay.
That's like saying, skip breakfast because we're gonna have a really good lunch. Terminator 2 is the lunch, and so the next on your list, it has to be Shawshank Redemption. Okay. It's so good. You don't like it?
No, I'm not saying I don't like it. It's just it's a tough movie.
It is, but it's good. It's really good.
From a tough topic and
Gosh,
tough movies to
something that's not good. Human trafficking.
The boys have been looking forward to this one for a while.
not
we
so
did
much.
A lot of we put this off for a while, but we got to do it. We got to do it.
You put this outline together, I think, about 6 years ago, and we
No, it wasn't that long
maybe
ago.
next time.
By the way, before we get into it, the listeners should know if you hear something. We'll try to put some of these links on the webpage because there's a lot of stuff we got to go through, and it's like, is that true? Whatever.
Yeah.
But this is well researched by Heather. And we have links and credibility and all that good stuff. So we will put those just in case you end up, saying something from this podcast and somebody's like, that's not true. And we cite it. So we don't always share all of our citations because we don't want to bombard you. But on this one, it's going to be necessary. And, this is obviously, this is an issue for me that I couldn't do, like, people tell me a lot, I couldn't do what you do. This is depressing. And,
Right.
I feel like I have the capacity for this and have been doing it for a long time, and you never get numb to the reality of abortion. But I get so infuriated with this. Like I would be like the violent guy that just runs his car into the abortion clinic. You know, I couldn't handle this. This is now the fastest growing organized crime in the world. It is a business.
Did we name the topic yet?
Yes, human trafficking and abortion. There we go. I just
Making sure people know
Try
what
not
we're
to
talking
say it over and over again. But it definitely ties in. This is not, this is this other issue. It ties in. It's modern day slavery, and I think Sound of Freedom, which people are like, I saw a movie. It did such a good job at shedding light on this, but it's not a recent phenomenon. This has been going on forever. But it's getting more attention now than it ever has, and certainly more awareness. Heck, you go to the bathroom at like Bush Continental Airport, and they have the signs, and it's in the movie theaters and the hotels, and it's good that they're the signs. But I'm like, that's where I started noticing years ago. I'm like, is this a problem? People are abducting like adults and children, and they're shipping them, selling them. You never see them again. This is a nightmare as a parent. And so let's just go down and let's look at some of the stats. Okay. And the problem with this is that we always think somewhere in some shady neighborhood, some kid's getting abducted. But this is in every neighborhood. Nobody's really safe from this. Okay. Human trafficking generates a profit of $150 billion a year. Mm-hmm. And is that so? So I live in Houston, and one of the things that put this on my radar was when the Super Bowl came. And apparently the Super Bowl is a huge generator for sex trafficking.
Yes. Any big sports things. Formula One is also really huge generator for sex trafficking as well.
So explain that to me. Is that I think is it one or the other? Is it access to people to then get into the sex trafficking, or is it people looking for prostitutes?
It's both.
It's both.
Yeah,
it's providing the services and taking more recruits, if you want to put it that way.
Right. And I guess one of the arguments I've heard to describe it in layman's terms and not quite so many legalistic and all these other terms with all of the moving parts in this is when you're talking about big events like the Super Bowl or Formula One or maybe even the World Series, although I've never heard that thrown in there. You've got a whole bunch of NASCAR, another one, whole bunch of you're going to have women at these events, but you're also going to have men, a lot more. Usually it's majority men that are coming to these events. They're more hyped up about what's going on. The people always plan to celebrate, and they plan to celebrate with what? Drugs, prostitutes, anything like that. So it's really big events like that will draw these pimps to bring all of their kids that they have and even adults, young adults, that they have stolen, kidnapped, or just coerced into being a sex slave. And they're providing those at high price, at interesting prices, should we say, just depending, because they know they're going to be in higher demand in this concentrated location. It's the third largest criminal enterprise in the world. And these statistics are from the Department of not the Department of Justice.
Homeland Security.
Homeland Security. Yeah, Homeland Security. So,
I don't know if you remember, if it's the third largest, I would assume number one is drugs.
I think, drug trafficking is number one.
What's number two?
I don't know if the porn industry is ever separated. I think it is.
Yeah.
But porn is
yeah. Well,
high
and
up
those
there.
are we can only take two topics at a time, but that's got to be tied into this.
Yeah.
Sex trafficking in the porn industry. Okay. 55% trafficking victims are women and children.
I would have actually thought higher.
I don't understand that. They're trafficking men?
Does that include
mostly boys, but yeah.
For what? For
also for the
sex.
same things.
So it's not
Holy
like the
moly.
migrant workers who are being taken advantage of and they're put in the back of a truck.
Yeah,
and
that's what
they're
I
in the
thought.
Field, or this is exclusively 55%
Like, are they saying,
sex
like,
trafficking?
we're going to our factory and you're 10 years old and you're going to work at my factory?
Right. So we are primarily focusing on human sex trafficking in this, but this does include labor trafficking.
Okay.
So that's why. Yeah.
And that is a thing. That's not a small percentage. That's,
No,
okay.
no. And we'll find out some more on that too.
Yeah, we're just going to go through some stats real quick. Okay. Average age a minor enters sex trade is 12 to 14. Most people would probably think that's like 15 or 16 or 17.
Yeah, and the note I made here was that age is getting younger and younger because boundaries are continuing to be pushed further in general. And if you think about that, it makes sense because child trafficking, is far worse now than it was decades ago. Child sex trafficking, and when you are somebody who has entered into this awful sin, like most sins, you just keep going further and further down that path.
Okay.
And it gets darker, and pretty soon, Hugh Hefner has this exact story. It's why you're not satisfied with softcore porn after a while, and you have to keep going towards hardcore porn and all those sorts of things. So this is the sort of thing where now a 25-year-old girl is not going to satisfy this victimizer any longer. And so they keep going younger and younger, and their fantasies keep getting more and more extreme in terms of
Freakish.
these sorts of things. Yeah. So children, I mean, it is, and again, this is why we put the disclaimer on this podcast. As difficult of a topic as this is to even think about, let alone discuss, it is sad, but there are very distorted people who get off with small children, including babies, sexually abusing babies. And so these are the types of things that happen because of our, broken world. We could talk for all day long about why this stuff happens, but this is continuing to get worse, and the ages are younger.
This is why I've evolved. I was going to show you how this, but I've evolved on the death penalty because, like, the first debate I did in high school was like against the death penalty. But the state has a right. Even the Catholic Church teaches this. Most people think the Catholic Church says you can never do the death penalty. That's not the case.
That didn't change under Francis?
No. The state, he loosens his verbiage about it, but he does that with whether coffee's black. But like the whole notion that the state has the responsibility actually to defend itself and to decide that, which actually would fall under a border wall or other things. But like the state does have that authority in Catholic teaching. And the death penalty falls into that, whether you need it or not. That's the debate. Like, are you going to have to keep some guy in a little hut, or do you have federal prisons? My issue with sex traffickers being executed by the state is that they can operate in prison. And if you can commit your crime in prison, maybe with the exception of murder, then you can't be alive. Like, you can continue to operate, and you see that with high-end drug lords. You see that with sex traffickers, and the theme of this. I mean, this is obviously a special place in hell for people that do this to children. Every 2 minutes. Hold on, I want to get to this stat. All right, so you mentioned this. Human trafficking cases are 80% sexual exploitation, 20% labor exploitation. Mm-hmm. I think most people think it's all sexual and it's all women, and that's really interesting. Mm-hmm. That it's 80%, and obviously some of that involves boys, but 20% labor exploitation. Every 2 minutes, a child falls victim to sex trafficking. That's unbelievable.
You can talk about
there's an abortion every 30 seconds. We'll compare it to that, just to show but that's global, and everybody has access to abortion. I mean, this is literally kidnapping children.
The talk about capital punishment and moderating on it, there's a whole matter of can they operate behind bars, but there's also, let's be honest, there's a clear justice case here. I'm not here making a case that we need capital punishment. That's not what this is.
I am.
Hold the angry emails. But there's Well, we can't judge. I'm going to judge this. I'm going to judge it all day long.
Well, the risk, the argument for the death penalty in this, which I'm against the death penalty in most cases, but the argument on this is that this actually cannot happen to somebody ever again, and a 1% risk is too much.
Yeah, this is where we need the William Wallace who goes in with his sword and his spear and like hacks people. Like, I have no sympathy, no quarter.
I don't know who does.
Right, nobody does. No normal person does. None of us know anyone who does, except for like the random, like oddball, like Soros-appointed DA.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, and nobody does on any case. Nobody had any compassion for bishops that covered up sex crimes against children, nor should they have. And people have wailed on the Catholic Church, and we deserved it. It was horrible, and those bishops got disciplined or arrested, and they should have. But this is just the issue, and even Matt Britton, our general counsel, who was a prosecutor for many years, he's like, you can just take the biggest dirtbag in the world or whatever, and if they're on a jury and something like this comes across, there's no flip-flopping. There's like, everybody's against this. Like, everybody's against this. At least we thought. Every year, 32 million people are sex trafficked in the world. That's unbelievable.
It's a lot. I didn't calculate what percentage of our
the United
world
States
population that is. Well, this is 32 million people in the world. I don't know what percent that is of 7 billion. Are we up to 8 billion now? I don't know. But it's far too many. And then...
But you don't have the U.S. number?
Yes, there are some U.S. numbers, I think, further down the line. Which we might get
Well, we won't get... We'll get back to that. Okay,
Yeah.
The International Labor Organization released its global estimates of modern slavery in September 2022. This estimates that at any given time in 2021, 6.3 million people were in forced commercial sexual exploitation. So this is like the workers who have abortion workers who have a conversion and leave, and the abortion workers that say, I hate working here, I'm leaving. This is the forced ones.
Mm-hmm.
These people, this isn't they're willing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that number is 6.3 million.
Right. Yeah, and out of the 10,300, so this is now national statistics here. Out of the 10,360 cases that were identified just from the National Human Trafficking Hotline in the year 2021, 7,899 were sex trafficking cases. So 7,000 out of the 10,000 plus, almost 8,000. And then it kind of breaks down what those various things looked like. So
Number one's porn.
Yeah, porn venues. Someone was, I was giving a talk about this last year because, by the way, January is known as Human Trafficking Awareness Month. So very appropriate that we're
One of the
having
reasons
this
we're doing this, yeah.
podcast during this month. And I know last year I gave a talk in Austin about human trafficking awareness and the link to abortion. And someone had asked me, what are porn venues? And I said, well, I mean, these are places that are set up to film porn. Like that's what we're talking about here, which that shouldn't be surprising to us that that's a breeding ground for
So
trafficking.
basically they have whatever, their apartment or house, and it's all set up.
Garage, studio, who knows?
They're trafficking people in, saying this is what's going to happen,
Yep.
and then you're gone.
Yep.
Or whatever.
So we have illicit massage and spa businesses, 596 out of the 7,899. 579 were hotel and motel based. 525 were residence-based commercial sex. This was lower than I expected. 369 were online ads. And
What does that mean?
that's where they found these. That's where they were able to solicit for this.
Oh, they were just advertising.
Right. So these cases were identified from the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So again, the sex trafficking cases were all founded from these, or based from these different breakdown of venues or avenues of how they were trafficked. Escort delivery service, strip clubs, truck stops, bar clubs. And then this one I found interesting.
This is surprising.
I wasn't sadly surprised by that. I was surprised that the numbers weren't higher.
Me too. So,
Well, these are just the ones that are reported.
But these
on
were
this one
just reported
hotline.
on this one hotline, exactly. And the last one, which was interesting, was legalized brothels.
that's
Three
the one
of
that
the
surprises.
cases
3 cases.
were legalized brothels from the hotline. And there is a note that I made sure to include.
But do we
here.
know about illegal brothels? Because to
I don't know.
Wouldn't there be like we're trafficking these people? We have the shady. We're not filming pornos, but we're it's an illegal brothel, and people kind of know, and this is where you're going. I thought that would be a high number.
That must be the illicit spas, the hotel, motel, the residence.
I guess
because you're
so.
not going to put up like a storefront of like
Right.
illegal brothel.
Yeah,
net.
Right.
this is not an illegal brothel.
You're right. And so some people are wondering, as I was when I read this stat, there's such a thing as legal brothels. And as of September 2023, Nevada is still the only U.S. state with legalized brothels. So, yes, they do exist.
With America kind of beating up the family the last 50 years, I am actually shocked and proud and glad and surprised that we don't have legalized prostitution, because it's legal in a lot of places.
Oh, they're pushing for it
I know they're but
big
they've-
time. The slut walks. You familiar with the slut walks?
We are not familiar with
You didn't show up to those before?
no, and we do not support Mel Gibson sleeping with the Queen in Braveheart, by the way. But yeah,
That's a big deal, because you can't say the term prostitute anymore. That's discriminatory, and it's sex worker is more appropriate now. That's what we should call
because
it.
that's uplifting.
Right. But that shows professional, and this is a realistic, we're supposed to take this seriously, and this is her choice, and it's a sex worker thing, and prostitute is too degrading of a term, because
Why?
people
Why is it degrading?
are
Because it describes someone.
But also you have
prostituting themselves.
one of the great things about this that the pro-life movement does have is you have all these people that survived and got out of this industry that used to be a sex worker, or used to be a
Yes.
prostitute, or used to be
Yes.
was trafficked and escaped and all of that. And of course they give their testimonials, and it's gut-wrenching, but it's amazing. It's amazing what a human being can cope with and battle through. I mean, these are stories of survival, which was so good about Sound of Freedom. But I'm still shocked that we don't have. I know there's always places pushing it, but that has still been like the stigma of we're not having legalized prostitution. Germany has it. There's different parts of Europe that has it. Germany, like, they market it and it's professionalized. It's like the oil industry.
How is pornography allowed if prostitution is not allowed?
I
Shouldn't
don't
that
know.
be against the law too?
I don't know.
This is
And this is where like, and I've had this argument with people, and they're like, well, you're not really free speech. And I'm like, I'm not. I mean, I admit that. Like, if you're going to lay out the whole free speech thing, and it's not like Oliver Wendell Holmes said that free speech doesn't mean you can't yell fire in a movie theater when there's no fire, right? That's against the law. But the argument is this is free speech. It's free expression. You're in the privacy of your own home and all that. And I'm like, I think it should be illegal.
I don't even think it's speech. Speech conveys something. As you said, expression, that's a great word. You're expressing an idea. When we talk, I don't think the founders were out there fighting for pornography, right?
The other thing is that it's not freely given.
Where do they say no to prostitution?
But if 6.3 million were forced into it, and out of the essentially 8,000 cases, 807 cases are porn venues. I just don't know how. That's a great point. I have no idea how the porno industry has gotten away with all this garbage over the years. And people just say, well, it's money and all that. Yeah, but there's a ton of money in drugs, and that's still illegal in most of America,
It's a real problem. I think this illustrates the problem with the libertarian-minded folks. You can't legislate morality. Really, like, tell me, what about our laws against murder? Is that not a law against morality?
Well, you can't go in a park and
Right.
show your thing. So it's just like we legislate morality all the time. What else are you legislating?
Right. What's the point of having any laws then? But wouldn't the argument, this free speech argument, be though that yes, free speech should apply as basically, except it ends, like if I'm swinging my fist, my right to swing my fist ends where your nose begins.
Yes. Here's the thing. I think Matt and I talked about this one time with Legally, because he outlawed pornography in his county.
God bless him.
You couldn't sell like a Playboy magazine in the gas station.
Oh, great.
And he's got a great story about it. But somebody ended up with the nickname the porn judge in his mind. And so, because he had a judge who was for it. But Matt was able to do that. Now that's a, a small county, and, you're able to just do it. And most people don't really know that it's not available. I don't understand that. I don't understand how. So what Matt said is the problem is defining pornography.
Right.
So if you have two people kind of making out in a movie, you could have people say, that's pornography, and it's like, but there would have to be a specific definition where that's the sole point for a sole industry, for a sole purpose. And that's 99% of the pornography industry. So I do think you would be able to get a definition of it and, get it outlawed. To me, that is the greatest question of how they have gotten away with this. This is probably a totally separate podcast, but pornography and this are so interconnected that
I'm sure it has nothing to do with the perversions of our ruling elites. Sure has nothing to do with that.
You're right, Steve.
Well, we're doing this, and it may be dated when we're recording it, but I mean, we've got who's the guy that killed him? Or got killed? Epstein. P. Diddy.
Oh, yeah.
And then apparently all these names are going to be released. You have Harvey Weinstein, who's just a creep on every level. But
the latest one was the lawsuit against Jay-Z.
Jay-Z, okay. But this
latest as of the recording.
Yeah.
This points to what you said, which is essentially the nature of sin. Mm-hmm. And it can be anything. Whatever you're going to indulge in a disordered way, you allow the devil in, and he's not satisfied. He's a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. I was once on retreat, and they do one meditation on the reality of hell. And one of the images they use is that because of our baptism and our life on earth and the limitations that Satan has as a lion, he's chained. He's chained. Like he can't actually get to us and devour us, right now, physically. But he's unchained in hell. You're in his complete domain by choices of your own free will. And I thought that was very powerful. And when you get into whatever it is you're going to get into, it's just never enough. And
right.
that's the tool of the devil. But I still think that this is absolutely extreme and insane, because you have the people that are like, you think the Roman Empire was perfect? And no, they had sexual, they were all running around having sex with kids and all of that.
Sexual deviance has been around since the beginning of time, practically.
has been around a long time. But I would say in the age of the media and everything, it's how popularized it is.
Yeah.
Early ages of exposure. Like when you were, I don't know, we're not that old, but imagine our parents and grandparents, you'd have to go seek it out at a place.
Yeah.
It wasn't just popping into your phone or your computer.
Yes.
Without looking for it. I remember when the internet was new, my grandma somehow got scammed into clicking some email that she didn't want. And
gosh.
You have to actually take care not to find it, but to avoid it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of this too, is that kids are being exposed to porn at earlier and earlier ages, not always by peers, despite what some people may think, but it's actually quite commonly from the home, because parents are fine with porn. Parents have porn, whether they don't have magazines anymore, but they have computers, and they're not.
Or they're allowing their kids to.
Or they're allowing their kids to go free on the internet without, thinking anything of it, where they could be exposed, where ads are constantly trying to get, even on the, quote, kid-friendly sites, which are not really kid-friendly, a lot of these. But I remember since you brought this up, a good friend of mine who is a professor said that he was talking to a group of young men who were in this Bible study type group. And they started, and it's also kind of a mentoring group, and they started talking about pornography exposure. And one of the students, and this was not very long ago, this is probably 5 or 6 years ago, one of the students was upset because his girlfriend was upset that he looked at porn.
And he thought she had no right
He
to be
thought
upset.
that was ridiculous.
Is that frowned upon here?
That's
And-
awful, though, that he was that.
But that was not an uncommon opinion. They were all kind of like, well, what's the big deal? Because everybody does it, right? And my friend, who is the professor, was like, well, when were you exposed to this? And we need to really address this. And their parents introduced them to it.
Oh, my gosh.
And he said that was like, he wasn't the only one. There was a few of them in this group. And he said he realized in that moment how much it's changed, because even though he himself and many of his peers, when they were younger, were exposed to it and had a time in their life where they were looking at it before they repented from that, they would never share that with their parents. That was you kept it to yourself. It was a very shameful thing. And now it's not even shameful anymore. And your parents are introducing you to this, and that's okay. And that's one of the things you hear on a lot of these reality shows, is that's the proper way to help teach teenagers about sex, is to show them porn.
Let's say this podcast ends, we're done recording, and I go read something, like some National Geographic has discovered that actually the Bible was fraudulent. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I believe in God anymore. I would believe in the devil from everything we've talked about. So
I would too.
Yeah.
Like if the argument for God is this podcast.
there are sins that I would never condone or tolerate, but I can understand. Like a woman gets pregnant, she's afraid, she gets coerced into an abortion. Like I understand that decision. I don't condone it. I understand it. This stuff, like showing your kids pornography, I don't understand that.
Showing your kids porn, kidnapping people, and making them sex slaves. I mean, it is. It's a whole new level. There are some myths, and so we're just going to run through these for time's sake.
Just do the highlighted ones, the bold ones.
Okay, thank you. All human trafficking involves commercial sex. That's a myth. Human trafficking only happens in illegal or underground industries. I definitely believe that for a long time. Only women and girls can be victims and survivors of sex trafficking, which is a myth that we talked about earlier. People being trafficked are physically unable to leave their situations. They're locked down. They're held against their will. That's interesting. It's more of a brainwashing.
I've heard this before. Like I've heard that this is.
I know
myth.
what you're gonna say. No.
No, I don't. I've tried to read about this. I don't understand. Like, are we saying that like the whole consent-based framework to sex, like you either consent or you don't, and it's binary, that there's some kind of middle ground here? Like, what does it mean if you're not being forced but nevertheless are being trafficked? I don't understand.
This is a whole big thing about grooming. There is a grooming process that happens.
Okay.
And this is I forget what you call it in psychology, but this is the
Stockholm?
Thank
Yeah.
you. The Stockholm syndrome, where sometimes these women do really, and maybe the guys too, the boys, they really do fall in love or have some sort of, very distorted.
He's the protector.
love
He's going to take care of
this
me.
person.
Aren't
Yeah.
drugs involved? That's my myth.
Of course,
It's like
drugs.
they're all
are-
drugged up.
Well, they're not all drugged up, but drugs are very commonly.
Isn't
part
it
of
like
this.
you kidnap them, you give them drugs, they're dependent on the drugs, and you can
And
keep
they
giving them
they do
drugs?
get them dependent on drugs often. That's not uncommon either. And that's the thing is, okay, and I want to point out something that was infuriating to me that I learned a few years ago from a human traffic rescue group that's here in Texas. Because this is the same thing as abortion workers. People say, well, why don't you just leave if it's so bad, right? In the abortion industry.
It's a
But
good
it's
comparison.
it's a cult. It's become a cult, and they become like
And we've had workers that were
dedicated.
like, well, I was pro-life and I worked there.
Yes. But an infuriating thing I learned from some human trafficking rescue groups was that there are laws that are the laws and the activists that are trying to push for legalizing prostitution, and also, we need to call them sex workers and we need to do this and that this is a choice, that, not all women who are prostituting themselves are doing this because they're forced to. Some of them, this is a way of life and they like it and they blah, 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 blah. And this human trafficking rescue group was like, no, here's what happens. Because they say, oh, when they're 18, they can just leave. When they turn 18, they can just leave because they're adults now. And if they're staying in and they're not leaving, then that means they want to be there. Well, they just turned 18, but maybe you've been trafficking them and you groomed them from age
Right.
8.
Right.
So that's a psychological messed up issue that you can't just say, oh, well, they could just leave if they wanted to. But see, they don't leave and they're 18. So therefore they have a right to do this type of work is what they're saying. So it's a really, really distorted thinking.
And one of the myths is that it's violent and or physically abusive, and you have basically the Romeo pimps. Never heard that versus gorilla pimps. I'm assuming gorilla is violent and Romeo is not.
Exactly. The Romeo pimp is the Romeo. He never gets violent with her, and he doesn't have to. Maybe he just coerces her. He's got a way about it. But yeah, gorilla pimps are physically abusive.
Well, it's inevitable that we get to the forced abortion topic. So forced abortions of trafficking victims, the 2017 U.S. Trafficking in Persons report states, sex trafficking victims are exposed to pelvic inflammatory disease, HIV, and other STDs. Human trafficking may force pregnant victims to undergo abortions, usually in unsafe conditions, posing further trauma and health risks. The link between sex trafficking and abortion is undeniable, which is not a shock to anyone. And we see it with the drug lords, too, in Latin America.
And I feel like we should just reemphasize, this is not live
pro-lifer
action
saying
films.
this.
This is
isn't
not
40 Days for Life.
lifenews.com.
No.
This is not the 40 Days for Life. This is U.S. Trafficking in Persons report.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I think we. I think we can. Do you want to get into any of that or skip over this part?
There is one thing. So, you guys, I'll bring a call back here. You like to make fun of me for my watching On Patrol Live and CrimeCon and all that stuff. No. However,
Dark.
the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children features in CrimeCon and on Patrol Live quite a bit.
Really?
And talks about missing children. And of course, a lot of these missing children, there's a fear that they're being trafficked, or maybe they even have a video that they were kidnapped and likely trafficked. But that's something that's actually helping expose this issue more and helping people become more aware of their surroundings and protect their kids, and also being able to spot kids more. Now, of course, AI technology, they're trying to use all that to spot kids randomly too, but thanks to COVID, it's not unusual even still today to see people wearing face masks.
I think the guy that killed the United Healthcare CEO, I think that's the end. Now, if you have a mask, you're a murderer.
Oh.
I think that the mask thing in 2025, you're up to something. And that would have been the case in 2019. If you're walking around in a mask and a
States
hoodie.
had laws against masks.
Absolutely. You can't wear a mask in certain areas. And so I just think that that's the end of it, honestly. How many crimes have been committed with the stupid COVID mask?
That was one of the things that we had trouble with during the spring of 2020 campaign, is there were laws in states that it was illegal to protest with a mask on. Okay, so what do? We're required by law to wear a mask, and now we can't wear a mask if we're protesting. I know we say we're praying, not protesting, but for the purposes of the prosecutors, I don't know that it made a whole lot of difference to them. But yeah, this is, Heather, I make fun of you a lot for the CrimeCon stuff, and I'm going to continue to do so out of lack of charity and a dilapidated conscience. But I guess I get it. Like the whole Chris Hansen thing where they're doing the sting operations.
Yes.
Like there's a certain, you hear about this, and I just want to see people face justice at this point.
Yes.
Yeah, it's and there's been a lot of legislation going back to 2000, Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, 2008. There was another, the William Wilberforce Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, and then in 2018, the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Reauthorization Act. I think they're raising the bar for the penalties. Isn't that what a lot of this is? Which I think the death penalty is totally justified. Whether that would be a deterrent, you can see there's arguments that go back and forth of whether the death penalty is or is not a deterrent. Yeah. But I've talked to a lot of people, and they say it is. But Epstein Island really. That was 2020 when all that came about. That kind of opened people's minds to a whole new level, because I think most people, including myself, like the myth is this is like shady, underground, dark alley, bad people out there doing bad things. And then you're like, here's some of the names. I don't want to say them on here, but you're like, they went to an island to have sex with a child? Like what the hell?
Royalty, former presidents, lots of celebrities. Yeah. It's really sad.
On the abortion front, you just referenced a whole bunch of these laws over 25 years that have been implemented. It's worth noting the states where they put forth legislation which would ban forced abortions or ban or require abortion providers to make sure that there are no signs of coercion. And you get the governors that veto them and say, no, this doesn't happen.
Right.
And
Doesn't
that,
happen.
I remember I was saying, oh, please keep saying more stuff like this when I was hearing years ago in Texas and in other states where these pro-abortion legislatures were going against the how do we combat trafficking laws. They were going against that. And I was like, oh, please keep saying more stuff like that out loud. You're exposing yourself for what you really are. Which is really sad because you shouldn't be against that. But there's several legislatures, including here in Texas, that have vetoed, like you said, these anti-trafficking laws.
I was one time.
That's unbelievable.
I was one time praying at 40 Days for Life in Madison, Wisconsin, and this couple goes in, and the guy walks out later, and he's like, "Look, I'm kind of with you guys. I'm not the dad. I'm just her friend. I brought her here because her boyfriend is like 19 and she's like whatever age, was underage, and she can't have this baby because then her boyfriend is going to go to prison." I'm like, okay, so like this guy just came out and like firsthand witness to the sexual abuse of a minor. So I called the police and they said, "Are you a mandatory reporter?" And I don't know. I don't even know what that means. But I do know that this guy just told me that this girl is being violated. Well, sir, you're not, so they wouldn't do anything about it. And they pointed out the law. So I went and looked in the law. And in Wisconsin, if you become aware of sexual abuse of a child, there are certain positions like daycare provider, teacher, et cetera, where you are required by law to report it. Reproductive health care providers are specifically exempted as not required to report.
Yeah, there you go.
What about healthcare workers? Like I know OBGYNs, they have to report it.
I don't remember the exact verbiage, but the fact that the word reproductive was in there was very
No, it's
telling.
basically like Planned Parenthood doesn't have to report it, but everybody else does. And that's the thing, like, but you're just a citizen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the cop, it's not your job. I don't know. If I see someone making a terrorist threat, is that my job?
And I think YouTube, social media, and everything has really helped expose more of this too, because as we all know, most of us can recall the live action videos where they did the sting on specifically about sex trafficking, and there were several of them that were aiding and abetting it. It was caught on camera. I asked Abby's ministry and then there were none recently if they had any statistics, and they said that approximately 60% of their clients, so these are former abortion workers who have come through and then there were none, 60% suspected that they had patients who were victims of trafficking but weren't allowed to ask questions or make reports. And this is in multiple states, not just Wisconsin. And 31% of them witnessed forced abortions in their clinics. And so forced abortions is common with, if you ever get to hear, I would encourage you, as hard as this is to hear these testimonials, if you ever get to hear a testimonial of a trafficking survivor, I know a couple of them personally who were forced to get abortions. And it's not that they will all be forced. Some of them want the abortion because they don't want to, for whatever reason, they don't want a kid. They don't want a kid by this person, or they don't want to have to deal with a kid because they know they're still going to be trafficked. But most of them, I think a lot of these rescuing groups argue that the women want their children because at least they have more of a purpose to strive and hopefully get out eventually. But they're forced. And they're not only forced to have abortions, they're forced to have sometimes 5, 10, 15, 20 abortions or more, a lot of these victims. And it just, where are they going to get these abortions? How does that happen?
It goes back to these governors, too. It'd be interesting to track the states since Roe was overturned who banned abortion. Did sex trafficking drop? Because you would think, why would you go to Alabama to sex traffic when you can go...
But they're not all in legal facilities. Many of these times, these
are illegal
pimps
abortions.
have abortion doctors on speed dial,
Their
and
own.
they're coming to them.
Okay.
But
And now
still,
that we have
it's
abortion pills,
it's
of
another
course.
speed bump. It's
another hurdle.
Yeah,
And
it
this-
is.
Have you ever heard the full-blown sex traffic presentation? Like in the former, the ones who escaped?
No.
Because we do a lot of presenting abortion to people, and we do tours here, this closed abortion facility. We did one last month, and people get physically upset or sick.
Yeah.
Just because, and Haywood does a great job, and he takes them through basically Abortion 101 and does the tour and the history of Planned Parenthood, and it's one of those,
Matter of fact.
Yeah, it's a matter of fact. And I mean, I think that is the angriest, most disturbed I've ever been. And the lady was phenomenal who made the presentation. So I was just impressed as a presenter, but sharing her story, sharing the history, how the business works, what you can do about it. Like we close. It's not like an abortion's evil, now go home. So it sort of had an inspiring ending of her testimony, but it makes you want to throw up. It is very different. Even Bill Maher said abortion's just different, right? And it's in that category of it's just I don't know how we do this to another human being.
This is also, I think, an important thing to point out as we're now on the heels of an election in which 2 out of every 3 television ads or YouTube ads or radio ads were they would force them to bear their rapist child, even in cases of rape and incest. Okay, well, let's talk about rape and incest.
Yeah.
Right. No, we're not going to go there. We're not going to punish them.
They won't prevent forced abortions. That's the political stance.
Right.
Yeah.
They do not want to. There is no forced abortion.
Yeah.
Every abortion.
That only happens in foreign countries, and even then, it's like
This is something that we cannot let go. Like, if there's a reason why we're doing this episode, in addition to it being Awareness Month, we just had 10 state-level referenda on abortion on the ballot, direct democracy in November. There will be more in 2026, and we need to move beyond it's too extreme and get onto the forced abortion, infanticide.
I've been very disappointed in some of the political pro-life messaging because it's like it's too extreme and it's all that, and it's just like you have the sex trafficking angle, you have vote no on abortions up to birth. That's it. That's the sign.
Yeah.
That's the easiest thing.
Right.
And put them on the defensive. But I think the messaging will clear up definitely this, that, you want to pad the pockets of sex traffickers, by allowing forced abortions.
I don't understand why it hasn't been part of it so far. We've been sounding the alarm. It's in Day 41 magazine. This isn't the first podcast that has broached this topic. But
I think politically, the liberals are much better at this, or the progressives, I should say, it just making every issue all one. But I think a lot of people think it's a separate issue. That abortion and sex trafficking are different. We see it with we saw it with abortion in the transgender movement. Until the guy says, "Well, I can't wait to get a fake uterus so I can be the first trans male to have an abortion," or whatever, and all that stuff. But it is becoming. There is more awareness. We do need to plug Sound of Freedom.
And did you see that movie?
Absolutely. I saw it in the theater. I walked out and I said, I'll never see it again. I was glad I saw it. It was very good.
Right.
Way to go, Jim Caviezel.
Yes.
He's a stud. It's what they did good, and we try to do this on the podcast. I don't know if we're successful, but I'm going in like, okay.
Yeah, which is everybody that
I don't think I'm getting popcorn.
Yeah.
And so,
right.
But they did a good job. Artistically, it's good. It's got
Yes.
funny lines. It's got the crazy, the big guy smoking the cigars, and he's kind of keeps some comedic relief at certain times. I thought they did a very good job of that. I thought they did a good job of it at Unplanned. Unplanned's a very heavy movie, and for many people, it was a one and done. I think Sound of Freedom for me is a one and done.
But they got the point across without exploiting children.
Yes.
Which is the key thing.
Yes.
Like, they're not showing any of the activity. They're not showing the abuse. They're basically, you see a closed door and you know what's happening. You know what they're doing. They're abusing the child. But
And I'm not saying you have to show it.
no,
obviously.
no.
You
Of
can't
course
show
not.
it. I'm not saying
that's abuse in
I'm
of
not
itself.
saying you show it, but I did think it's funny you brought that up, because I remember having the thought of, I would never go see it, but it would do a lot of good on this issue if Quentin Tarantino made a movie about this, where you do see some of the violence, not against children, but
Right.
just the process. And
Right.
Because in a movie like Sound of Freedom, you can't really show how bad these bad dudes are.
Yeah.
But if you're just a pro-violent movie director who's really talented, you could be like, we're about to turn everybody. It's like nobody wanted to go swimming after Jaws because Steven
Well,
Spielberg.
why hasn't it happened?
Because they're in on it.
Yeah, and this
Right.
is the thing.
Exactly.
Look at what was the reaction to The Sound of Freedom? The mainstream media came
Ignored
out and they ignored it, or they put, this is QAnon, Trump, conspiracy, tinfoil hat theory. Wait a minute. We're on the side of the oppressed, the underdog, the marginalized. Here's a film protecting children from sexual abuse, and you're going to come out against it?
And here's why that's significant, because a lot of people are like, you didn't like my movie, but you're like, it made $300,000 and it was out of theaters after 2 hours. That wasn't Sound of Freedom. I think it hit 80 million. It may have hit 100. May have hit $100 million. So this is a real movie that made money, real Hollywood money. Forget the topic, but that's what they look at. That's what The Passion paved.
Right.
When Mel Gibson made $600 million around the world on The Passion, all of a sudden it was like, okay, maybe there's a market for this. But that's the point, is that I'm not saying Quentin Tarantino's in on it. I was just using him as an example of a director. But the whole industry is like, why would you not go after this? You know, they do all the other issues except well, I don't even know if we can say abortion because there's been so many movies now. But certainly sex trafficking. Like, why can't we just show bad dudes getting justice coming to them in a big secular blockbuster way? And they do that with stuff all the time. You know?
Yeah.
So
You mentioned sort of the perception that sex trafficking and abortion are different issues, and in a certain sense they are. But as we head into some of these issues with forced abortion legislation, abortion on demand, all 9 months of pregnancy, amendments, all of these sorts of things, I think it is our job to integrate it, to draw that connection.
Very
And if
intertwined,
you
yeah.
are a listener or you're viewing this podcast at home right now and you're an hour in to hearing about the worst things in the world, I can't think of anything worse than what we're talking about right now, and you're wondering, how is this podcast dedicated to helping me end abortion where I live? I think it's to make that connection, to make that integration, that these are not separate issues, and in fact, they're very adjacent issues.
since we've been hammering this, let's re-say the stat. And so here it is. 60% of former workers suspected that they had patients who were victims of human trafficking, but they weren't allowed to ask questions. 31% of former workers witnessed forced abortions in their clinics. Nearly a third of all abortion workers saw forced abortions. Can you imagine if you were a cardiovascular nurse and you had a guy that was like, no, I don't want heart surgery. And a third of them, they were forced to get it. I mean, it'd be the end of the world. That's crazy. And that's the stat. If you want to get anything out of this besides just, being outraged, we're not trying to anger everybody, but that's the stat. 60% of former workers said that they suspected that they were dealing with someone who's trafficked, and 31% witnessed themselves forced abortions.
Man, if I were the president, I'd love to be like, hey, you've got
Absolutely.
3 months to come forward with everything you have, and you get a blanket pardon. If Hunter can get pardoned, these people can kind of turn in the sex traffickers and expose them. They should get a pardon.
That's funny, not funny. That's interesting that you say that, because the Hunter pardon, it's the whole thing is ridiculous and corrupt. But Biden has been ridiculous and corrupt his entire life. I could have told you a year ago Hunter was getting pardoned. That's no shock
He's
at all.
president right now. Does it feel like Joe Biden is still president? No. It's been forgotten about for months.
Who?
By him as well.
No.
Yeah.
But that opens the door, because the precedent is so outrageous. Like, but I'm going to use the pardon for good. I'm not pardoning my corrupt son or relative. So that is an interesting thing. Like you can be pardoned, but you need to come forward.
Yeah, you got 3 months.
You got 3 months. Well, yeah. There's
30 days, I don't care.
There's
Just
a lot of discovery with
by whatever day.
If you just said, you Planned Parenthood, you better come forward or we're defunding you. They would
Yeah.
never do it. And then you'd be able to be like, justify it to the public by saying, I wanted to know their involvement in sex trafficking, and I would pardon them, or they would lose their funding. They wouldn't come forward, they would have something to hide, and then you defund them.
Therefore, they're defunded.
Therefore, they're defunded. So, okay, go over this. I did not know about this anti-trafficking apps, because I'm paranoid. I know I'm not paranoid, but I've made myself, all the women in my life, fully aware to the point of they're like, you're crazy. But
I use one of these apps. I don't use the other one so much. So I'll go by the latter one first. So it's called the Stop app, STOP. But the Stop app is for the purpose of, if you see suspicious activity, you can fill in the details, post videos, photos in this app, and submit anonymously. Now, we would strongly encourage you not to get involved in anything. And this is the point of the app, is law enforcement officers do not want you to be trying to rescue someone yourself, obviously, if you're going to take a picture, you better make sure you're in a hidden location. You're not you're not
you,
right
the
in front
viewer,
of
are not in fact Jim Caviezel.
Are not Jim Caviezel. That's right.
so if you suspect it, because I think about this, and of course I get inside my own head. It's like seeing somebody on a plane. They're a terrorist, and you tackle them, and it's like, it's just whatever.
You can just submit this anonymously in this app. It asks you certain questions. You put what you know. The information goes to law enforcement officers and the other authorities, and they use it to hopefully not just reduce but prevent trafficking and interrupt the systems that allow them. So they're basically saying, if you could be our eyes and ears, if you happen to see something and you're not, even if you're not sure, but if you just think you get a funny feeling. For instance, at rest stops a lot along highways, I've heard stories of people that we know where they saw someone trying to kidnap a little girl from a rest stop, and it was two women. And it's often that women, like in the movie Sound of Freedom, it's often they use women because people are more likely to trust women because they're calmer demeanor, they're nicer, they're more. These were women that were trying to lure this strange little girl in to their car from a rest stop. So if you witness something like that, try to, again, make sure you're in a safe area. But
this is good though, because we see the billboards that are like, everybody has a responsibility to stop human trafficking. And I see the billboard, I'm like,
how? Yeah, how?
I'm not going to start it, but I don't know how to stop it.
No, well, my whole thing is, if I see somebody in the airport and like the guy or the lady walks off, just ask, oh, is that your aunt? Is that your? That's how I would, like when I'm thinking, if I encountered this, after you see the signs, what would I do? And I would probably try to communicate with the person like, hey, is that your dad, or what's the deal? And see, I know.
Shut up, punk.
I'd get arrested
out of here.
for being some psycho
They're going to jump
pervert.
you later.
Yeah, and they're like...
But the one that I use actually quite often is called Traffic Cam, and it's the way trafficking is spelt, TRAFFICK, cam. And it's the easiest thing to do. When you go into your hotel room, before you start unpacking and settling in, you take pictures of the bed, the wall art, the bathroom, the seating. It asks you, here, take a picture of this. Now take a picture of this. You hit send. And what it does is it helps law enforcement officers pin down frequented hotels that are used for trafficking victims, because a lot of times these pimps are taking women.
That's really smart. And all
so
they
they're
have
using
is some
AI
little...
technology, for the curtain pattern or whatever, and you just submit that, and boom, it's like one of the. Ever since I learned this like 10 years ago, I've been doing this.
Man, we've made fun of Heather a lot. And
I know.
She's a good person.
I am doing something.
You are a
to try
good
to
person,
stop human
and
trafficking.
you're doing a lot. You did this outline, and this is all the crime shows that you watch. This is great.
And we can have Jill put up these.
Yeah, because the
too.
Traffic Cam is it's TRAFFICK and then Cam, CAM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That app.
So if you know someone who's a victim of human trafficking, you can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is 24/7 confidential, 1-888-373-7888, or you can text 233-733. So that's the National Human Traffic Hotline. We have many post-abortion healing ministries. A lot of people that listen to this have their own local ones. There's a few national ones, Rachel's Vineyard, Project Rachel. There's another one called Support After Abortion, which is 844-289-HOPE. That's the phone number, 844-289-HOPE, if anybody is suffering from an abortion in their past, and especially if you are a survivor of trafficking and you've suffered from abortion, we would want you to get abortion healing as well as healing from being trafficked. So
Yes, and we'll put all that on the webpage. Thank you.
Good job,
Goodness,
Heather.
Great job. This is comprehensive. And also on some of the stats that we shared, we will put those up with the links and the citations. If you have a question about this, please email us at podcast@40daysforlife.com, podcast@40daysforlife.com. I know for me, years ago, this was an eye-opening experience for me when I had that experience of hearing the presentation. And it just gets... the problem gets worse and the awareness gets greater, and there's definitely an obvious tie-in to abortion and to Planned Parenthood. And so another reason to join us at defundplannedparenthood.com. We will have a Defund Planned Parenthood webcast, so be sure to sign up for that and make this part of your pro-life New Year's resolutions going into 2025. So please rate, review, share this important podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless you.